This audiobook isn't here to preach. It's here to expose. What you give attention to becomes your truth. This is about reclaiming your power from what no longer deserves it. The shadow you worshipped. Introduction. You become what you admire. You absorb what you constantly place on a pedestal. And whether you call it worship or attention, the truth remains. Energy flows where reverence goes. The problem isn't that you don't believe in a higher power. The problem is, without realizing it, you've made fear your God. You've bowed to limitation. You've praised struggle, and in return, they've made a home in your life. Have you ever wondered why specific patterns keep repeating in your life? Why does success feel just out of reach? Why do relationships echo the same painful notes, even with different faces? It's not bad luck. It's not poor choices. It's not karma punishing you. It's the law of internal allegiance. Every human being worships something, not in the traditional sense of kneeling in prayer or singing hymns, but in the more profound, more genuine sense, devoting your inner attention to something as truth. What you mentally repeat, what you emotionally feed, what you chronically affirm, even in silence. If you constantly tell yourself, "I'm not good enough," you begin to serve that belief like a god. If you obsess over scarcity, you begin to live inside its temple. If you bow to external validation, you'll build your entire life chasing applause, never peace. But here's the thing. Worship is not wrong. It's natural. It's the direction of your energy. The question is, what are you worshiping? And is it worthy of who you are becoming? In this audiobook, we will unravel the hidden rituals that govern your life. Thoughts, assumptions, and habits you've unconsciously exalted. We will explore how to redirect your worship away from fear, unworthiness, and external idols, and back toward inner wholeness, personal power, and aligned truth. This is not about becoming someone new. This is about remembering who you were before fear taught you to kneel to the wrong things. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Invisible Altar. What you worship without knowing. You don't need a temple to worship. You don't need incense or chants or hymns. Worship begins in the unseen places, between thoughts, in repeated stories, in silent agreements. Every human life revolves around an altar. Most people just don't realize what's sitting on theirs. Your altar is not physical. It's energetic. It's built from your attention, your repetition, your focus, your emotion. Whatever you give the most energy to, that becomes the center of your inner temple. And slowly, you begin to bow without knowing. Think about the thoughts you repeat to yourself when you're alone. I'm not ready. No one sees me. Everything always goes wrong. These statements, when said once, are harmless. But when rehearsed daily, they become devotion. And that devotion becomes a mirror that shapes your life. What if I told you that your outer world is nothing more than a reflection of your internal worship? The law of mental equivalence, often spoken of in New Thought teachings, states that every outer condition is preceded by an inner image. What you hold consistently in your consciousness becomes your experience. This isn't magic, it's mechanics. Florence Scovel-Shinn put it like this: man can only receive what he sees himself receiving. In other words, you don't get what you pray for. You get what you believe you're allowed to hold, and belief is formed by what you consistently honor. Let's strip away the spiritual language for a moment and talk pure energy. Your subconscious mind, the deeper layer of awareness running beneath your daily decisions, functions like a loyal assistant. It doesn't judge. It doesn't filter. It simply amplifies what you consistently feed it. So, if every morning you wake up and pour attention into lack, the subconscious goes, this must be important. And it organizes your perception, your decisions, and your emotional reactions to align with that importance. This is the invisible altar in action. It's where you sacrifice your peace to stay aligned with struggle. It's where you trade clarity for the comfort of old chaos. Not because you want to, but because part of you has learned to honor the familiar over the true. We don't worship consciously. We worship through patterns. And unless those patterns are seen, they remain unchallenged. And what remains unchallenged eventually becomes a god in your life. For example, consider the common pattern of "I always mess things up." At first glance, it seems like a passing self-critical thought. But look deeper. That thought may have roots in childhood shame, reinforced by years of emotional repetition. Over time, it becomes sacred in the worst way, something you unconsciously protect and prove. It's no longer a thought, it's a throne, and your identity begins to orbit around it. The irony is, most people would never call this worship, but it is. Worship, in its rawest form, is emotional allegiance. It's what you turn to in moments of uncertainty. It's the voice that wins in the silence. It's the image you carry of who you think you are and who you think you must be. If you always default to fear, then fear is what you bow to. If you always default to control, then control is your idol. If you live for external validation, then applause is your master. So the question isn't, do I worship? It's, what have I been giving my emotional allegiance to? And once you know what sits on your altar, the next question is even more important. Is it serving your becoming or enslaving it? The beauty of consciousness is that the moment you see the pattern, it begins to dissolve. Awareness is the light that burns false gods. You can begin to shift your altar, not with force, but with clarity. Start by asking, what thoughts do I repeat most often? What emotions am I loyal to? What do I turn to for a sense of worth or safety? What belief am I defending when I shrink or self-sabotage? These questions aren't meant to shame you. They're meant to free you. Because once you recognize what you've been unconsciously worshiping, you're no longer its prisoner. You become its observer. And from that position, you can choose again. This is where the shift begins. You do not need to earn your way to a better life. You simply need to dethrone what no longer deserves to sit at the center of your being. As we move forward in this audiobook, we will continue peeling back the layers, identifying the disguised idols, the false narratives, and the inherited beliefs that have been silently ruling your life. We will not only question them, we will replace them. Replace fear with presence. Replace guilt with compassion. Replace survival-based worship with conscious devotion to what is real, whole, and aligned with your highest nature. This is the work of reclaiming your altar. This is how you begin to shape your reality from the inside out. Let's continue. Chapter 2: The God of Your Attention. Why Focus Creates Reality. If Chapter 1 asked what you're worshiping, this chapter answers how, because here's a truth that most people overlook. What you focus on becomes your God. Not in a religious sense, but in the structure of your psyche. Whatever dominates your attention eventually shapes your beliefs, emotions, identity, and outcomes. Focus is not just mental effort. It's spiritual allegiance. It's the invisible thread that connects your present reality to your future one. And the thread is always responding, not to your wishes, but to your attention. Let's revisit a simple truth from New Thought philosophy. Energy flows where attention goes. If you focus on what's broken, what's missing, or what's wrong, your life becomes a mirror of scarcity. But if you begin to shift that same attention toward possibility, toward wholeness, toward peace, you begin to experience a different world. This isn't positive thinking. This is neurological wiring. Modern neuroscience backs this up. The reticular activating system, RAS, a bundle of neurons at the base of the brain, acts like a filter for your awareness. It takes your dominant thoughts and beliefs and starts scanning your environment for confirmation of them. Ever notice how when you learn a new word, you suddenly hear it everywhere? Or when you're considering buying a red cars start appearing all over the road? That's not coincidence. That's the RAS, working with your subconscious mind to bring forward what you've told it is important through focus. Now imagine what happens when your focus is on failure, on being unseen, on never catching a break. Your mind, like a loyal servant, begins scanning the world and your experiences to confirm that belief. It gathers proof. It edits reality. And soon you think, see, that's just how life is. Not realizing you've simply been worshiping the wrong God. Let's call this dynamic the loop of attention. You focus on a thought. For example, I'm not enough. Your brain filters reality to confirm it. You interpret those confirmations as truth. The emotion reinforces the thought. The cycle begins again, stronger. And here's the dangerous part. The loop doesn't need your permission. It just needs your participation. This is how you end up loyal to things that hurt you. Not out of desire, but out of familiarity. But what happens when you take your focus back? When you stop feeding the narrative of lack and begin feeding the narrative of enoughness? You don't just think positive. You shift your allegiance. You dethrone the false god and begin worshiping something higher. Neville Goddard once said, "Change your conception of yourself, and you will automatically change the world in which you live." That's not metaphor. That's instruction. Your focus is the wand. Your belief is the spell, and your world reshapes according to both. Let's bring this closer to the heart. What do you think about when you're not trying to think about anything? What themes arise in your moments of stillness? Do you feel dread or anticipation? Resentment or gratitude? Fear or trust? These are your altars. And focus is the candle that keeps them lit. If you find yourself constantly circling the same struggles, it's not because you're cursed. It's because your attention is chained. But here's the good news. Chains can be broken. The shift begins by noticing. Noticing when your focus slides into old territory. Noticing when you're rehearsing the worst. Noticing when you're making space for fear instead of possibility. And once you notice, you interrupt. Not by force, but by direction. Try this. Instead of fighting the thought, "I always mess up," pause and ask, "Is this where I want my focus to live?" Then redirect, not to blind optimism, but to something truer, something kinder, something more aligned with who you're becoming. It might sound like, "I'm learning to show up for myself," or "Even when I fall, I rise wiser," or simply, "I'm here and I'm growing." It's not about perfection. It's about permission. Permission to focus differently. And over time, as you keep feeding the higher image, it becomes stronger. Your RAS rewires. Your subconscious reorients. And what once felt impossible becomes inevitable. You may remember from Chapter 1, we spoke about the invisible altar, the place where emotional allegiance quietly lives. Now, you understand the candle that keeps it burning. Focus. Where your focus lives, your life follows. And if you've been living in loops of lack, it's not because you are broken. It's because your attention has been stolen. And this is your invitation to reclaim it. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. You don't need to meditate for hours or chant mantras at sunrise unless you want to. You simply need to decide, again and again, where your attention belongs. And when it drifts, gently pull it back. Because every moment is a choice to feed what's dying or nourish what's birthing. To focus on who you were or on who you're becoming. To worship fear or to align with truth. In the next chapter, we'll explore what happens when your beliefs crystallize into identity. How the thoughts you've repeated become the person you think you are, and how to shift that identity from survival to sovereignty. But for now, remember, you don't have to fight your old life. You just have to stop feeding it. And it all begins with the God of your attention. Chapter 3. Identity is a mirror. Becoming what you've repeated. By now, we've explored the invisible altar of worship and the God of your attention. We've uncovered how focus isn't just passive noticing, it's a sacred agreement. And now, we arrive at the next layer of the architecture. Identity. What you focus on, you feel. What you feel, you believe. What you believe, you repeat. And what you repeat, you become. This is the quiet making of identity. Not in a single decision, but in the compounding of thousands of unconscious agreements. Most people think identity is who they are. But in truth, it's who they've practiced being. Let that sink in. You didn't become insecure overnight. You practiced it by repeating doubts, shrinking in rooms, and apologizing for your existence. You didn't become confident in one bold moment. You practiced it by showing up, even when trembling, by choosing to speak when silence felt safer. Identity is not fixed. It's patterned. And the most dangerous identities are the ones we never question because we think they are just the way I am. But what if the way you are is just the way you've been rehearsed? Neuroscience supports this. The brain is neuroplastic, which means it literally reshapes based on repetition. The more you fire a certain thought, the stronger the neural connection becomes. Eventually, it becomes your default, your reflex response, your filter for reality. It's no longer, I feel like a failure. It's now, I am a failure. A subtle but powerful shift from emotion to identity. This is how trauma, rejection, and even offhand comments can scar the subconscious. Not because the moment was loud, but because it was repeated internally. We don't just suffer pain, we rehearse it. And through repetition, pain becomes personality. So what can be done? We start by breaking the mirror. That is, disrupting the reflection you keep agreeing with. Refusing to repeat the lie. Refusing to identify with the version of you that was never fully you. Neville Goddard once said, "To be transformed, the whole basis of your thoughts must change. But your thoughts cannot change unless you have new ideas, for you think from your ideas." Translation: you don't change by fighting old thoughts. You change by planting new ones and practicing them. You don't get free by wrestling the old identity to the ground. You get free by focusing on the next version of you and rehearsing that instead. It sounds too simple, but it's not. Think about it. How did you become someone who doubts themselves? By repetition. So how do you become someone who trusts themselves? By repetition. This is where many give up. They want identity shifts to feel dramatic and instantaneous. But identity, like muscle, builds through practice, not declarations. It's not about shouting, "I am worthy," once. It's about choosing worth in small, consistent ways. Choosing to rest instead of overwork. Choosing to express instead of suppress. Choosing to leave when something dishonors you, even if it's familiar. Each act is a brushstroke, and over time, the painting changes. Let's talk about the mirror metaphor again. The mirror is not your enemy. It's neutral. It simply reflects what you're offering. If you constantly say, "I'm not good enough," the mirror doesn't argue. It reflects back scenarios, people, and feedback that echo your belief. But, and this is the miracle, when you begin saying, "I am healing, I am growing, I am learning to stand in my truth," the mirror adjusts. Not instantly, but faithfully. And this is why we say, identity is a mirror. Not because it shows you who you are, but because it reveals what you've been believing. Let's anchor this in practice. If you want to change your identity, begin asking better questions. Not, why am I like this? But, who am I becoming? Not, what's wrong with me? But, what belief am I ready to release? And most importantly, what am I rehearsing every day? You may recall from Chapter 2 that attention feeds the altar. Chapter 3 now reminds you that repetition sculpts the worshiper. If you keep rehearsing fear, you become anxious. If you rehearse possibility, you become powerful. It's not magic, it's mechanics. The subconscious mind does not care if what you repeat is empowering or destructive. It simply agrees and automates. That's why changing your identity requires awareness, not effort. You don't have to try harder. You just have to choose what to rehearse. And as you rehearse differently, something miraculous happens. You begin to embody a new truth, a version of you that always existed beneath the noise. One that didn't have to be invented, just remembered. So, take a breath. Look in the mirror, literally and spiritually. Ask yourself, what reflection have I been practicing? Then start practicing another. You are not who you've been. You are who you're becoming. And every repetition is a vote. So cast wisely. Chapter 4: Emotional Frequency, the Language of the Subconscious. In the last chapter, we uncovered that identity is not something static. It is sculpted, rehearsed, and mirrored through repetition. But beneath those rehearsals lies something deeper. A more ancient language, a signal the subconscious trusts more than your words. That language is emotion. You can say, I am confident all day long, but if you say it with fear in your chest, your subconscious doesn't believe your words. It believes your feelings. Because while the conscious mind speaks in logic, the subconscious speaks in frequency. And emotions are frequencies in motion. They don't just color your experience, they transmit it. Have you ever walked into a room and sensed the tension without anyone saying a word? That's emotional frequency at work. Have you ever smiled through gritted teeth but still felt resistance in your gut? That's the subconscious picking up what the surface is trying to hide. Neville Goddard said, "Feeling is the secret." And he was right. Not effort, not trying. Feeling. Because feeling is how your body tells your mind, this is real. So what are you feeling most often? Fear, doubt, shame, or love, trust, joy? This isn't about toxic positivity or pretending to be happy all the time. It's about becoming aware of your emotional baseline, your home frequency. Most people don't realize they've been broadcasting lack for years. They've been transmitting, I'm not safe, I'm not seen, I'm not enough. And the universe has faithfully echoed it back. Not to punish them, but because that's what their frequency instructed. Remember what we explored in Chapter 2. What you worship responds. And in Chapter 3, you become what you rehearse. Now Chapter 4 tells you this. You attract what you feel. Your emotional state becomes your energetic signature. Your subconscious stores these patterns as truth. It doesn't judge the quality, it only records the consistency. So how do we begin to shift this frequency? Let's go back to the body. Your body is the storage vault of emotional memory. Before you knew what fear was, your nervous system had already memorized it. Before you had the words for grief, your chest had already tightened around it. This is why affirmations alone don't work. Because if the body doesn't feel safe, it won't allow change. To shift your frequency, you must learn to create emotional safety. And that starts by allowing your feelings, not suppressing them. You don't heal shame by ignoring it. You heal it by witnessing it with compassion. You don't rise into worthiness by denying the unworthiness. You rise by sitting with the wound and whispering, "You don't have to protect me anymore. I'm safe now." The frequency shifts not when you fix yourself, but when you embrace yourself. You'll notice something miraculous. As your emotional tone rises, your subconscious softens. It begins to trust that it's okay to release the old programs. You are no longer in the survival state that required them. This is the beginning of emotional alchemy, turning the lead of pain into the gold of power, not by force, but by presence. Dr. Joe Dispenza speaks about elevated emotions: gratitude, love, joy, awe. These are not just spiritual fluff. They are high-frequency states that recondition the body and rewire the brain. He writes, "You have to teach your body emotionally what the future will feel like before it manifests." In other words, feel the feeling first. Let your body experience the miracle before it arrives. And the subconscious will begin to align reality with that instruction. Why? Because the subconscious doesn't care about timelines. It only cares about emotional instruction. If you repeatedly feel the emotion of already being whole, already being free, you collapse the gap between desire and manifestation. This is how reality begins to reorganize. Not because you forced it, but because you felt it into being. Let's bring it all together. In Chapter 1, we unveiled the altar, attention. In Chapter 2, we met the God of your gaze, what you worship. Chapter 3 taught us repetition sculpts identity. And now, in Chapter 4, we uncover the fuel behind all of it: emotion. Emotion is the sacred ink your subconscious uses to write your story. Change the ink, and you change the narrative. This is why emotional mastery isn't optional, it's the foundation. Not in the sense of controlling your feelings, but in feeling them on purpose. Practicing joy. Training the nervous system to hold safety. Tuning your frequency to possibility again and again, even if you cry while doing it, even if your voice trembles, even if you forget sometimes. Because each moment you return to emotional alignment is a vote for a new version of you. And eventually, those votes stack up. Your subconscious rewrites the script, your frequency shifts, and life responds. In the next chapter, we'll explore how this inner frequency influences not just what you feel, but what finds you. How alignment draws not just better thoughts, but better relationships, opportunities, and outcomes. But for now, ask yourself, what emotion am I rehearsing most often? And what would happen if I rehearsed something higher? You don't have to be perfect. You just have to begin. Chapter 5. Attracting from Alignment. When the inner world speaks first. What if I told you that what you experience is not what you desire, but what you are aligned with? This is the law behind the surface of every coincidence, every unexpected phone call, every closed door, and every sudden opportunity. Alignment is the invisible magnet that pulls the outer world toward the frequency of your inner world. And unlike wishful thinking, alignment is not passive. It is active resonance. Let's return briefly to Chapter 4. We learned that emotion is the language of the subconscious, and that feeling, not just thinking, initiates change. Now, in Chapter 5, we push this further. What you consistently feel becomes what you naturally attract, not because the universe is rewarding you, but because it's matching you. The inner world always speaks first. Alignment is not when you want something. It's when your thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and identity are all speaking the same message. Let's break this down. You say you want abundance, but deep down, you feel anxious every time you spend money. You repeat affirmations, but your nervous system tenses every time you imagine success. That's misalignment. You are transmitting scarcity while requesting wealth. And the subconscious only listens to the transmission, not the request. Neville Goddard called this living from the end. It means you assume the state of the wish fulfilled, not just mentally, but emotionally and energetically. He wrote, "To be conscious of being poor while praying for riches is to be rewarded with that which you are conscious of being, poverty." That's why so many well-meaning people stay stuck. They say the right things. They hope for the best, but they are emotionally rehearsing lack, separation, unworthiness. The universe listens to the tone, not just the words. So, what does true alignment look like? Alignment feels like peace, even when nothing has changed yet. It feels like safety in your body before the outcome is guaranteed. It's when your being says, "This is already mine, even if it hasn't arrived yet." Alignment is the frequency of embodiment. It's not trying to get the thing. It's becoming the version of you who already has it. This is where science echoes spirituality. In quantum mechanics, there's a principle called entrainment, where two oscillating systems will eventually synchronize if they are close enough. The stronger signal brings the weaker into resonance. Your dominant emotional state functions the same way. When you dwell in the frequency of confidence, calm, gratitude, your outer world begins to entrain to that signal, not instantly, but inevitably. Opportunities that match that vibration begin to notice you. People start to respond differently. Not because you changed them, but because your signal shifted. And now you're tuned in to a different layer of reality. You've moved from survival mode to signal mode. Let's look at a practical example. Imagine you're tuning a radio. Every station is already playing, but you can only hear the one you're tuned into. If your internal station is still playing the channel of not enough, that's what you'll keep hearing, no matter what you try to do externally. But once you shift the dial, new channels become audible. Not because they weren't there, but because you were previously tuned to something else. This is how alignment works. It's not magic, it's mechanics. When your emotions, beliefs, and attention all harmonize, you unlock the experiences and people that already exist on that frequency. Dr. Joe Dispenza puts it beautifully. The quantum field responds not to what we want, it responds to who we are being. And being is the key word. That's why trying hard doesn't work if the trying comes from lack. That's why chasing backfires if your energy says, "I don't believe I have it yet." Alignment is not striving, it's settling into your signal. That doesn't mean you won't take action. You absolutely will. But it will be inspired, not forced. Rooted, not frantic. So how do we begin to align? It begins with honesty. Ask yourself, what emotional state do I spend most of my day in? Does that state match the version of me who already has what I desire? If not, what belief or memory is still tuning me to an old station? You see, alignment isn't about faking positivity or pretending to be spiritual. It's about realignment, moment by moment, breath by breath. It's about noticing when you've slipped out of your center and gently tuning back in. This is what we call living inside the signal. It's not something you visit on Sunday or during meditation. It becomes who you are, even in traffic, even during setbacks. Because when you live inside alignment, the field responds, not randomly, but reliably. In Chapter 1, we explored how your attention is an altar. Chapter 2 revealed that what you worship shapes you. Chapter 3 taught you that identity is rehearsed. Chapter 4 showed that feeling is the frequency. And now, Chapter 5 has brought you into the power of resonance, where your inner alignment creates outer magnetism. This is not about perfection. It's about consistency and awareness. So the next time something out there triggers you, don't just react. Pause. Tune in. Ask, what am I aligned with right now? Because that's what's creating the echo. In the next chapter, we'll uncover the missing piece, why the subconscious often resists change, even when the conscious mind desires it. It's not sabotage, it's survival. And learning to speak to your subconscious with compassion may be the very key to everything you've ever tried to change. But for now, breathe, tune in, and remember, the universe is not waiting. It's responding to you. Chapter 6. The subconscious isn't sabotaging you. It's trying to protect you. You've likely heard it said before, I keep sabotaging myself. But what if I told you, no sabotage is happening? Your subconscious mind isn't working against you. It's working for you. Not based on your desires, but based on your perceived safety. It doesn't care about your goals. It cares about your survival. And the problem is, what it defines as safe might be the very thing keeping you stuck. The protective programming. From the moment you were born, your subconscious began recording everything. Your surroundings, your caregivers' behaviors, your emotional experiences. But it didn't record these things as neutral data. It filtered them through a singular lens. What must I believe in order to stay safe? If you grew up in a home where love was unpredictable, your subconscious may have decided that staying small or quiet was the safest way to avoid rejection. If you watched your parents fight over money, your subconscious may have linked wealth with pain. If your uniqueness was ridiculed, your subconscious may have learned to blend in, because being seen became a risk. These beliefs don't vanish with age. They simply grow roots and become the unspoken laws of your life. You call them self-sabotage, but they are really self-protection, wearing the wrong uniform. So when you try to manifest a new reality, one filled with visibility, love, abundance, or freedom, your subconscious might panic. Not because it doesn't want these things for you, but because it was programmed to believe those very things are unsafe. The result? Delays, resistance, confusion. Not because you're broken, but because you're protected. The safety illusion. What your subconscious labels safe is often outdated. It's operating on a system that hasn't been upgraded in years, decades even. Like antivirus software from 1998 trying to run on a modern laptop. The old patterns can crash every new attempt at growth. And here's the kicker. Your subconscious will always choose the familiar over the unknown, even if the familiar is painful. If heartbreak is familiar, it will repeat it. If scarcity is familiar, it will recreate it. If invisibility is familiar, it will enforce it. The subconscious isn't logical. It's loyal to what it learned early on. This is why affirmations sometimes fall flat. You might declare, "I am worthy," while your subconscious replies, "But when we felt worthy before, we got hurt. So let's not go there again." The gap between what you consciously desire and what you subconsciously feel safe to have is the real root of your internal conflict. You're not lazy. You're not weak. You're running two belief systems at once, and the subconscious one is faster, louder, and older. Shifting the role of the subconscious. To move forward, you don't fight the subconscious. You retrain it. Think of it not as a saboteur, but as a bodyguard who hasn't updated the guest list. It's standing at the door, refusing to let abundance in because it once mistook it for a threat. You must now show it that safety has a new definition. This is where emotional repetition becomes more powerful than verbal repetition. It's not enough to say, "I am abundant." You must feel the safety of abundance in your body. Visualization helps. So does mental rehearsal. But above all, consistency rewires protection pathways. When you consistently show up for yourself, soothe your nervous system, and choose a new belief, even when the old one feels stronger, you send the message, "This is who we are now." And your subconscious, loyal as ever, will adjust. Embracing the role of the inner guardian. Here's a powerful reframe. Your subconscious has always been trying to protect the child within you, the younger version of you who didn't have control, who didn't understand why the world felt scary, who thought that smallness equaled safety, and that silence equaled love. So instead, of yelling at your subconscious for slowing you down. Speak to it, not with force, but with compassion. I know you're trying to keep me safe. Thank you. But I'm not that helpless child anymore. I'm ready for more, and it's safe for us now. This kind of inner dialogue is not fantasy. It's biology. Neuroscientist Dr. Joe Dispenza teaches that repeated emotional experiences fire and wire new neural pathways. When you show your subconscious that a new identity is not only possible, but familiar and safe, the resistance dissolves. Neville Goddard would call this assuming the state, not just wishing for change, but stepping into the new self with authority, not pushing, not convincing, just embodying. And when the body believes, the mind follows. And when the mind follows, reality bends from resistance to reunion. So many people live their lives treating their subconscious like an enemy, fighting it, suppressing it, blaming it. But your breakthrough begins the moment you realize it was never the enemy. It was the frightened protector. And the more you fight it, the stronger it resists. But the moment you embrace it, acknowledge it, retrain it, offer it new reference points, it becomes your greatest ally. In this chapter, we've unpacked the misconception of sabotage. In truth, what's been labeled as resistance is a misplaced loyalty to an outdated version of you. Your subconscious does not hate your dreams. It simply hasn't been shown how they can be safe. And that's your role now, to become the teacher of your own inner guardian. Not through domination, but through demonstration. Not through discipline, but through devotion. Remember chapter 5? The moment you release the lie that you're broken is the same moment you stop seeing protection as punishment. Chapter 6 now teaches you to reframe the internal resistance and become the bridge between the old fear and the new self. This is not sabotage. This is sacred protection, awaiting a new command. Chapter 7. Your reactions reveal your programming. We often believe that our reactions are just who we are. Short-tempered, jealous, defensive. But reactions are not identity. They are instructions. They tell us what the subconscious still believes is true. Every time you flinch at praise, shrink from opportunity, or feel anxious when things go too well, you are witnessing the fingerprints of past programming. And until that programming is rewritten, your future remains quietly enslaved to your past. This chapter is not about judgment. It's about recognition. Because when you recognize the reaction, you reclaim the remote control of your inner world. The pattern beneath the pattern. Let's take a typical example. Someone compliments your work. Instead of feeling empowered, you feel awkward, uncomfortable, or worse, suspicious. They're just being nice. They don't really mean it. Or, if they knew the real me, they wouldn't say that. Why? Because somewhere along the way, your subconscious received a message. Praise is a setup. Maybe praise was always followed by punishment. Or maybe you learned that standing out made you a target. So now, decades later, the subconscious equates attention with danger, and so it reacts, not to what's happening now, but to what used to happen. This is the key. Your reaction isn't to the present, it's to your past. The subconscious doesn't distinguish time. It simply loops what it believes. As Dr. Joe Dispenza teaches, if you keep thinking the same thoughts, you make the same choices, which produce the same behaviors, which create the same experiences, which then generate the same emotions. And those emotions influence your thoughts again. That's how the same life gets recreated. If you want to stop manifesting the same struggle, you must interrupt the reaction cycle. Triggers are teachers. Many of us live on autopilot, reacting to life without examining why. But when you begin to ask, why did I feel that? After each emotional spike, something powerful happens. You become the observer, not the reactor. Neville Goddard often emphasized the importance of awareness. He said, "Your opinion of yourself determines your expression." In other words, what you believe about yourself at the core becomes your experience of the world. And your reactions are the clearest clues to those beliefs. Do you get angry when someone doesn't text back? You might be reacting to a fear of abandonment, not the silence. Do you feel anxiety when asked to speak up? You may still carry an inner program that says your voice isn't valid. Do you self-sabotage right before success? The subconscious might believe success is unsafe, lonely, or unsustainable. The conscious mind says, "I want change." The subconscious replies, "But change threatens the system I know how to survive in." Until you make the hidden beliefs conscious, your subconscious will keep hijacking the wheel, driving you in circles and calling it fate. The biological loop. Let's go deeper. Each time you have a reaction, a neurochemical response is triggered. Cortisol floods the body. Your nervous system shifts into fight or flight. Your body braces for a danger that might not even be real. Eventually, this reaction becomes habitual. Your body expects the hit, even in neutral moments. It seeks tension, like a magnet seeks metal. And before you know it, you're addicted, not to joy, but to the emotional pain you've practiced. This is why we replay arguments in our heads, why we anticipate rejection before it happens, why we feel restless when peace arrives. It's not personality, it's programming, and it can be rewritten. How to rewire a reaction. Step 1 is not to suppress your emotions. It's to observe them without shame, without blame. Start with curiosity. Ask yourself, what story did my subconscious just attach to this moment? When was the first time I felt this way? What was I taught this reaction meant? Once you trace the root, you can choose a new response. This is where the power of scripting, mental rehearsal, and meditation, as discussed in Chapter 6, come into play. You must practice a new emotional baseline before your subconscious can believe it's real. If your reaction to success has always been fear, practice breathing into celebration instead. If your reaction to stillness has always been anxiety, train your body to feel safe and calm. If your reaction to love is retreat, practice staying softly, gently, patiently. And over time, the subconscious redefines what normal feels like. And you begin to manifest not what's familiar, but what's true. The reaction that rewrites everything. There is one reaction that changes the trajectory of your life. choosing to pause, not reacting in the old way, but sitting with the discomfort long enough to choose differently. This sacred pause is not weakness, it is mastery. Because in that space, the subconscious begins to learn, I am no longer who I was. I can choose again. And choice, repeated in presence, becomes identity. The thread from before. In Chapter 6, we reframe the subconscious as a protector, not a saboteur. Now, in Chapter 7, we go a step further. We learn that protection often speaks through reaction. And if we meet those reactions with awareness instead of resistance, we begin to rebuild a life not driven by fear, but by choice. You're not broken for reacting. You're simply being invited to remember what still needs healing. Because every reaction is a message. Every emotional spike is an echo. And once you hear it, really hear it, you can choose a new frequency. You are not your programming. You are the one who can rewrite it. Chapter 8. From secret to seen. When inner becomes outer. The subconscious doesn't just store your life, it reveals it. When something manifests in your world, it's not a coincidence. It's a revelation. You don't attract what you say you want. You attract what you've consistently rehearsed, emotionally, energetically, subconsciously. That's why affirmations don't always work. You can say, I am abundant 1,000 times, but the signal remains confused if your body is still anchored in scarcity. Neville Goddard once said, the world is a mirror, forever reflecting what you are doing within yourself. In other words, your outer world is your inner world made visible. Does that conflict with your partner? A mirror of unresolved self-worth. That stagnation in your finances. A reflection of hidden beliefs about what you deserve. That recurring pattern of loss. Often, a manifestation of the subconscious needs to feel familiar pain, because pain can also become home. It's not punishment. It's programming. And manifestation is not a test. It's a translation. The language of the unseen. The subconscious doesn't speak in words. It speaks in frequency. In Chapter 6, we explored how the subconscious is always trying to protect you. In Chapter 7, we revealed how your reactions expose your programming. Now in Chapter 8, we uncover how those emotional programs begin to crystallize into physical experience. Emotion is the ink. Repetition is the pen. Your life, the manuscript. Every time you feel something strongly, especially with repetition, the subconscious takes it as truth. And then it begins building a reality that reflects that truth. This is why people who feel unloved consistently attract situations where they feel rejected. Not because they're cursed, but because their subconscious is simply agreeing with what they've long rehearsed. Faith isn't hope. It's evidence. Faith isn't wishful thinking. It's a structure the universe responds to. You don't manifest because you desire. You manifest because you believe. And belief in the subconscious is not an idea. It's a vibration, a state of being, a practiced emotional tone. When you walk in faith, emotional certainty, you begin to embody the end result before it arrives. This is why mental rehearsal, scripting, and elevated emotion, as taught by Dr. Joe Dispenza, are so effective. Because the body doesn't know the difference between what's vividly imagined and what's physically experienced. To the subconscious, imagination is reality. So the question isn't, how do I get what I want? The question is, what inner world have I made normal? Making the invisible visible. We all want change. But are we willing to become emotionally compatible with what we say we want? You want abundance, but do you feel safe receiving? You want love, but have you practiced being seen without shame? You want freedom, but do you secretly fear the responsibility that comes with it? The universe doesn't respond to your surface voice. It responds to your dominant voice, the one that lives in the subconscious. That's why shifting your identity is the most powerful thing you can do. Because once you see yourself differently, the world will too. From secret to seen. Think about the caterpillar. It doesn't add wings. It dissolves completely, becomes unrecognizable, and then reforms into something new. The transformation is messy, invisible. It happens in the dark. But once it's complete, the result becomes impossible to ignore. So too with you. Your identity shift doesn't start in the spotlight. It begins in the secret. In the small daily rituals, the thoughts you catch and replace, the feelings you decide to breathe through instead of collapse into, the future self you mentally rehearse becoming, again and again, in quiet. And then one day, the outer begins to reflect the inner. Not because you forced it, but because you became it. This is manifestation, not a magic trick, but a mirror. Not a reward, but a reflection. What this chapter reveals. As we close this chapter, let's reflect on the thread we've followed. In Chapter 6, we reframed the subconscious as your protector, not your enemy. In Chapter 7, we decoded how your reactions are signals, revealing your hidden beliefs. And now, in Chapter 8, we've connected the final dot. Manifestation is the subconscious going public. The invisible becomes visible, not to impress, but to instruct, to show you what still needs shifting, to invite you into new rehearsal, to align you with your next becoming. You are not a victim of random events. You are the author of mirrored realities. And if you don't like the reflection, you're free to rewrite the script. The secret is never really secret. It always finds its way to the surface. So make sure the truth you rehearse in silence is the one you're ready to see revealed. There comes a moment in every seeker's journey when the mirror becomes too clear to ignore, when patterns no longer look like coincidence, but messages, when pain stops feeling like punishment and starts looking like programming. You begin to see that your life has not been authored by luck, fate, or chaos, but by the silent agreements you made with fear. Not intentionally, not consciously, but through repetition, reaction, and 1,000 unseen rehearsals. This audiobook was not written to shame you, but to awaken you, to help you see what you couldn't before. That manifestation is always happening. And if you don't consciously choose what you believe, the subconscious will do it for you. Every chapter has brought you closer to the truth that the subconscious is not an enemy, but a servant. That fear is not a curse, but a teacher. That what you focus on expands, and what you emotionally rehearse becomes reality. But now, a new question rises. What do you want to see reflected next? Because here's the radical truth. You are the cause, not the effect. You are the initiator, not the victim. You are the programmer, not the program. If fear could build a life that feels stuck, small, and spiraling, then imagine what love could build. Imagine what certainty could construct. Imagine what faith, not the religious kind, but the deeply embodied kind, could reveal. You're not broken. You're not late. You were simply rehearsing an identity that no longer fits. And now you've been given the mirror and the pen. So write again. Rehearse again. Believe again. This time from power. This time from clarity. This time from love, not fear. Because the moment you change the inner script, the universe changes its response. And maybe, just maybe, that's what you were meant to discover all along.